Hi, this is International Master David Pruess for Chess.com, and today I am doing a lesson for beginners about the first move in a chess game. There are exactly 4 moves in the starting position for white which are played regularly by grandmasters, and those moves are c4, d4, e4, and knight to f3. And those are the 4 moves which I won't be talking about today. What I'm going to talk about today are all the other possible first moves. Now, the fact that these moves are very rare at a grandmaster level may correctly lead you to conclude these are not the very best possible first move. One of those 4 moves which is constantly played by grandmasters is most likely the best move, and that is why grandmasters play it. And in fact, these other moves I'm going to show you today are definitely a little bit inferior to those 4 moves. However, they're inferior on a scale of hundredths of a pawn, of tiny little bits of positional advantage and disadvantage, which are really immaterial in the games of amateur players. So you have a license, until you become a grandmaster, to experiment with other first moves and develop your own unique playing style and opening systems. And I know not everybody wants to do that, but I know that some people do. So we definitely have videos about established openings, but today I'm going to introduce to you all the different first moves that are possible and tell you a little something about what's good or bad about each of these moves. And I think whether or not you ever choose to adopt those moves, this will be useful to you for at least 2 reasons. Number 1, as I tell you the pros and cons of these moves, you should be able to learn some lessons about opening play. And number 2, some of your opponents may play these variations. Some of your opponents may watch my video and their interest may be piqued by one of these unusual ways to play chess, and so you may have to face this yourself. Alright, so we're going to begin on the left side of the board and just go left to right here with openings. So the first opening move that I'm going to consider is pawn to a4. Now, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the move pawn to a4? Well, it helps only one white piece. Which piece is that? The rook. This is the only piece whose scope, whose ability to move, has been improved by playing a4. And the second thing that this move does is it gains a little bit of space for white over here on the queen side. Now, this move here, I think, in balance, is not the very best because rooks are the hardest piece to use early in the game. Absolutely the hardest piece. There's a famous saying, which is not to bring your queen out too early. That doesn't always hold, but why don't people say don't bring your rooks out early? Well, because it's almost impossible to bring your rooks out early. They're so unwieldy, and it would take quite a bit of time for white to get this rook going. But once they do, they would find this rook to be a target, just like the queen is, because any piece that attacks the rook, for example, I will attack it with a bishop. Almost any piece that attacks the rook will be threatening to trade for it because the rook is worth more than those pieces. So like the queen, your opponent is going to have the opportunity to bring out pieces while threatening your rook and thus winning time when you have to move your rook again. And really, it's just even harder to get the rook out than the queen, and that's why you see the queen come out more often than the rook, right? Like, for example, in this kind of a scenario, your queen can come out faster and more naturally and actually make threats, whereas it's very, very hard to make use of your rook early in the game. For that reason, a4 is one of the worst openings that you can choose. And one thing that black may consider is to play this right away to control that square with their bishop and not even let you bring out the rook, but they're by no means obliged to because you don't actually even want to bring out your rook. What white would want to do after playing a4 is not try and employ the rook, but rather just to use the space that it has, the hidden power that it's supplying behind this pawn, and keep playing a normal game now with a little bit of a queenside orientation. So for example, maybe playing like e3 to let the bishop out this way, and then trying to advance more pawns on the queen side and build up strength there. And that way you can get some use out of the rook. But in a moment we'll see a better version of this, I think.